The Book of Genesis Part 56. The Book of Genesis Part 56. James Gunn. Motivations in Life Chapter 29:1-20. There is never a dull moment for the one who indulges in the study of Jacob's biography. Quickly one scene changes to another, each being so diverse from the other. Let us follow him into new localities and relationships. Jacob resumes his journey. Nothing eventful seems to have transpired in Jacob's journey from Bethel to Haran, a distance of possibly 400 miles, but indubitably God kept his promise and was with him all the way. On his arrival in Mesopotamia, and in the district where Laban the Syrian lived, little did Jacob expect that more than 20 years should elapse before the Lord would direct that he return home again. Joy mingled with sorrow, delight marred by deception, progress affected through jealousy, and toil interspersed by trial were to characterize the years at Padanaram, but on the afternoon of his arrival he probably anticipated only the pleasure of meeting with his mother's relatives and of experiencing a period of rest and safety in their home. How futile it is for man, especially a Christian man, to plan his life. Much better is it that he yield life and all to the Lord. Job, who wrote probably before Jacob's birth, avers, man's days are determined, the number of his months are with thee, thou hast appointed his bounds that he cannot pass, Job 14 verse 5. In the school of God David had learned this lesson well. He says, I trust in thee, O Lord, I said, thou art my God. My times are in thy hand, Psalms 31 verses 14-15. Jacob arrives at Haran. What a place is the village or district well? The importance, in the community, of this center is not understood by the residents of a modern city with all the conveniences of public utilities. Night and morning in many Latin American towns and villages, as well as in many communities of the Middle East, neighbors gathered around the well to obtain their supply of water. On such occasions they gossip together, family news is divulged, community plans are made, friendships are forged, and enmities are formed. The well in the center of the village becomes the hub of village activities. It was at such a well that Eliezer met Rebekah, Genesis 24 verses 10-28. David knew the well at Bethlehem, and longed for a drink from its cool depths. Sitting on the stone parapet surrounding the well at Sychar, our blessed Saviour conversed with the Samaritan woman, John 4. James, the Lord's brother, apparently has the village well in mind as he presses the lesson about the tongue upon the conscience, James 3. Maybe he had stood by a community well and listened to the gossip there, the kind words and the cruel words, the blessings of the tongue and the cursings of the tongue. Obviously, he drew a contrast between the human mouth and the well. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. Doth a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? The implication in the language of James might easily be that, since from the fountain at the village well only sweet water is expected, so from the mouth of the Christian only words of blessing should be expected. Jacob meets Rachel. Jacob, from the shepherds gathered around the well, promptly made inquiries about his mother's relatives. He learned that they were well, and that a cousin, Rachel, was expected at any moment with her father's sheep. In those ancient times in the East, it was the custom that the youngest unmarried daughter take charge of her father's sheep. While awaiting her arrival, it seemed to Jacob that the shepherds were wasting a lot of time. He could not understand why they did not allow the flocks to drink and then return to their pasture for the rest of the day. He was told that the well was not opened until all who used it regularly were present. The well was kept covered by a heavy stone to ensure that no animal or irresponsible person open it, and to conserve the water from loss by evaporation in the heat. It was at this well that many of the noble qualities of Jacob's character were seen. He was of an inquiring mind. He did not know the practices of the men of Haran, but he asked questions and soon learned. He was cooperative, for he rolled away the stone. He probably did not do this himself, for generally the stone used was so heavy that 2 or 3 men were required to remove and replace it. He certainly helped. Furthermore, he was industrious. Jacob had spent the greater part of a month on the way, he had walked hundreds of miles, yet, without hesitancy whatever, he watered his uncle's flocks. He was affectionate, for Jacob kissed Rachel and disclosed to her his relationship. He was her father's brother, using the word in its broadest sense of uncle, nephew, or brother. He was warm-hearted, and lifted up his voice and wept. Jacob was not a stoic; emotionally he was overcome. He had arrived at his destination, he had found his relatives, for God had evidently guided him. The tension of the past weeks, the fears of the way, and the suspense of inward struggles were over, so he found relief in tears. There were weaknesses in his personality, we know. He had been dominated by his mother; under her influence he had acted deceptively. He was mercenary and bought from Esau his birthright. Yes, there were bad traits in his personality, but there were also noble qualities worthy of emulation and development as well. The child of God should learn to overcome the evil with good. He should understand the conflict between the flesh and the spirit, and yield himself to the Spirit of God who produces the fruits of righteousness in Christian lives. Galatians 5 verses 17 to 23. In the building of a strong character, he should add to the new nature that God has created within him virtue, knowledge, patience, self-control, etc. 2 Peter 1 verses 5 to 10. Jacob receives a welcome. How light a load becomes, and how sweet even drudgery seems when love is the motivation of action. The welcome received in the home of Laban was sincere and genuine, the hospitality extensive and real. The conversation between the uncle and nephew was cheerful and informative. Jacob learned from Laban much about his uncle, his household, and his 2 daughters. Laban learned from Jacob much about his sister, Rebekah, her household, and her 2 sons.